しいからこういうとこ来るし、やっぱり好きになってしまったから来てるみたいな感じかな。
Japan has unbundled intimacy. Everything from emotional to physical connection can be bought here. If you want someone to listen to you, pay for a host. If you want someone to touch you, pay for a service like Men's Est or other services provided in places like Kabukicho, also known as the red light district in Tokyo. And here, it's more than normalized. And to be honest, it kind of makes sense as to why. As someone who's been living in Japan for almost a year now, I want to dive into the reality of how dark the monetization of loneliness has become in Japan. Modern dating has separated what used to come together. Emotional touch, physical connection, companionship, all of these things that typically come in one person have, well, been unbundled. You can get them almost like fast food at a restaurant. For example, about 0.5% of people in Japan are considered hikikomori, which is like someone who's essentially withdrawn from society or socially recluse. And the severity of this is quite unfortunate because while it might not be affecting a majority of people, the level of loneliness that these people face and the social needs that are unmet are staggeringly high. Now, if we assume that 5% or 10% of these people are affected to a lesser degree but still impacted greatly, that's still over 10 million people who are deeply affected by this in Japan. And that's where the problem becomes much less niche. So let's talk about host clubs. If you're not familiar, host clubs provide people with paid connection. And on the surface, that seems fine. It seems harmless, but at its depths, it's actually extremely predatory. And that's kind of a thing that's overlooked a lot and something I didn't even realize until maybe a few weeks ago living here. There's a famous documentary called The Great Happiness Space Tale of an Osaka Love Thief.
人間ってすごいみんな弱くて一人やったら弱くて寂しくて悲しくてでも素晴らしくて輝いてて暖かくてみんな地方から出てきた人でも居場所が欲しくてこういう場所に集まってきて僕ら1000円で売ってるもの1万円で売ってても
There's a host named Issei who is genuinely loved and adored by the women that he's built connections with. He listens to them about their dreams, their worries. He's always available, always charming, always down for a fun time. He's perfect. Why deal with another guy who might be emotionally unavailable when Issei can be emotionally comforting to you? It seems easy. But that's the thing, he's selling them the dream. And even at one point, he admits that many of the women who, while they do want to marry him, even though they say this, he would never actually tell them that they were someone that he wouldn't want to marry because that would be losing customers for him. But here's where it turns a bit dark. There's a well-documented pattern. There are women that are so deeply involved with their host that they end up going into debt for them.
She was just working in cafe. She was really pure, never have done those kind of work. But she liked me so much that she started to sell herself. She spent a lot of money to me, but mostly it was the debt to the store.
And a lot of times these women are coerced essentially due to financial desperation into things like sex work. And as someone living in Tokyo too, it does make me a bit sad because when I'm seeing different people, well, women in this case, who are holding up signs and different lines of work, it doesn't mean that all of them are financially entrapped and coerced into this kind of work, but a lot of them are. Enough of them to the point where it's a very real documented thing, and it kind of just changes your perspective of life a bit here. And I don't necessarily think that loneliness equals these problems, but I do think that in this country, when loneliness runs so rampant, not even just in a romantic sense, but just friendship, time for family and friends, it's so prevalent here that I do believe there's a large root of these sorts of problems are because of it. And I think it starts with just how Japan operates as a society, which, if we look at before, can paint the picture of why the nightlife industry has so much demand for what it is you're looking for. These empty spaces create loneliness, which then drives people back into these spaces to become more lonely and dependent on the spaces that are doing the very thing that is the problem. And it doesn't end because it was never designed to end that way.